She thought. Her $5 date was just a stranger until the millionaire single dad married her for love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware filled the small downtown cafe. It was a Thursday evening in Chicago, the kind of night when city lights reflected off the rain-slicked pavement and made every window glow. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and fresh espresso, the air warm against the cold wind outside. At a corner table, a young woman hesitated by the door. Her name was Lila Monroe, 27, waitress by day, dreamer by night. She tugged at the sleeve of her thrifted cardigan and glanced at her reflection in the glass. The dress she wore was secondhand, the strap slightly frayed, and her nerves were visible in every small movement. "This is ridiculous," she whispered to herself, "but I promised Emma I would go." Her best friend had signed her up for a cheap dating app, one of those $5 blind date gimmicks meant for lonely hearts who could not afford fancy dinners. Lila had laughed it off until curiosity got the better of her. She scanned the tables, murmuring, "Table 4, table 4." Her heart beat faster. Then she saw him, a man sitting alone near the back, dark hair, neatly combed, navy suit too fine for a place like this. He looked lost in his phone, shoulders relaxed, presence calm but confident. That has to be him, she thought, taking a deep breath. Lila forced a bright smile, walked over, and said softly, "Hi, you must be Daniel, right? I am Lila, nice to meet you." The man looked up, startled for a second. His name was Ethan Carter, but Lila did not know that. He blinked, then smiled politely. "Oh, hi Lila. Yes, please, sit." She slid into the seat, clutching her purse. "I am sorry, I am terrible at this. Blind dates are weird, right? You never know if the person will even show up." Ethan tilted his head, amused. "That is true. I actually almost canceled," she continued, nervously stirring her coffee. "My friend said you might be a little quiet, so I am ready to talk enough for both of us." He was about to correct her, tell her she had the wrong man, but something stopped him. His business meeting had just been canceled, and there was something about this woman's sincerity that caught him off guard. She was nothing like the polished people who surrounded him in corporate boardrooms. She felt real. He smiled faintly. "Then I am glad you did not cancel." Lila laughed softly, easing into the conversation. "So, what do you do?" "I work in food," he said vaguely, choosing his words carefully. "Oh, like restaurants? That is cool. I am a waitress at Rosie's Diner on Maple. It is not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on. Well, most of them, anyway." Ethan chuckled quietly. "That sounds like honest work." "It is," she said, her eyes brightening. "One day I will open my own little bakery. Nothing big, just a place with good bread and cheap coffee. My mom used to say, if you can feed people, you can heal them." Her voice softened, the sentence hanging in the air like a secret. Ethan leaned forward, intrigued. "That is a beautiful thought." She shrugged shyly. "It is silly, I know." "No," he said, his tone gentle. "It is not silly at all." For a moment, they sat in a comfortable silence as the rain tapped against the window. She looked at him again, curious. "You do not really look like a guy who goes on $5 dates." He smiled, eyes glinting. "And what does a $5 date guy look like?" Lila grinned. "Probably not like someone who could afford this suit." "Oh," Ethan laughed, and the sound made her heart skip unexpectedly. She had not realized until then how long it had been since she laughed like this with anyone. Then, her phone buzzed on the table. A message popped up. "Hey Lila, I am at Table Pedwar. Can you see me? Daniel." Her smile froze. Slowly, she looked up at Ethan, her cheeks flushing crimson. "Wait, you are not Daniel, are you?" He hesitated, guilt flickering in his eyes. "No, I am not." "Oh my God." She stood quickly, mortified. "I am so sorry. I sat at the wrong table." "Lila, it is okay." But she was already grabbing her coat, nearly knocking over her chair. "This is so embarrassing." She rushed out into the rain, her reflection blurring in the glass. Ethan watched her go, a strange ache forming in his chest. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted his name, his money, his power, never his company. Yet for a few minutes, a woman who thought he was just a stranger had made him feel human again. Outside, Lila clutched her bag, rain soaking her hair. "Smooth move, Lila," she muttered. "Only you could mess up a $5 date." She laughed at herself, but deep down, something about the man's calm voice lingered in her mind. She had no idea that her small mistake tonight would change her life forever. That night, rain kept whispering against the window of Lila's small apartment. The city lights outside flickered faintly through the thin curtains, painting the room in a pale orange glow. She sat curled on her couch, knees pulled to her chest, replaying the embarrassing moment at the cafe over and over again in her mind. Every time she thought about how she had sat at the wrong table, her stomach twisted. Her roommate, Emma, peeked up from behind her laptop. "So? How was the famous $5 date?" Lila groaned, covering her face with a pillow. "Do not make me talk about it." "That bad?" Emma asked, setting the laptop aside. "Worse," Lila said, muffled under the pillow. "I sat with the wrong man, talked his ear off for 20 minutes, then found out my real date was at the next table." Emma blinked, then burst into laughter. "Oh my God, Lila, you did not." "I did," she said, voice rising. "And the worst part? He was nice, like, actually nice. He even pretended to be the guy I was supposed to meet." Emma smiled knowingly. "Maybe it was not so bad then." Lila dropped the pillow, her eyes distant. "He looked like someone who has everything figured out, probably just felt sorry for me." She tried to sound casual, but there was something in her tone that Emma caught a trace of curiosity she could not hide. Across town, high above the glowing skyline, Ethan Carter sat alone in his penthouse office. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the soft hum of the city below. His assistant had gone home hours ago, and the only light came from the lamp beside his desk. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the untouched glass of water in front of him. He should have forgotten about her by now, but he could still hear her laugh, the way her words came out in a rush when she was nervous, the way she talked about her dream bakery as if it were something sacred. He had met hundreds of people, investors, board members, influencers, but none of them had ever looked at him the way she did. Not as a millionaire or a brand, but simply as a man. He reached for his phone, scrolling through messages, business proposals, contracts, meetings, nothing human. He sighed, closing it, the quietness of the room suddenly heavy. The next morning, Lila woke before dawn. The gray light of early morning spilled across her kitchen table, cluttered with unpaid bills and a half-eaten slice of toast. She tied her hair into a messy bun and pulled on her faded uniform from Rosie's diner. Another day, another 12 hours on her feet. When she stepped outside, the air was sharp and cold. Her sneakers splashed through shallow puddles as she hurried toward the bus stop. Her reflection on the wet pavement looked tired, but determined. By 7, the diner was alive with noise. The sizzle of bacon, the ding of the bell, the soft chatter of regulars filled the space. Lila moved between tables with practiced ease, a polite smile fixed in place, even when her feet ached. "Morning, sweetheart," said Ruth, the owner, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a raspy voice. "Rough night?" "You have no idea," Lila replied, grabbing a coffee pot. "I went on that blind date Emma signed me up for." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "And? I sat with the wrong man," she said flatly. "A total stranger, and then ran out like my hair was on fire." Ruth chuckled. Maybe the stranger needed a little excitement in his life. "Oh, more like a restraining order," Lila muttered, pouring coffee into a customer's mug. But deep down, she knew Ruth was right. There had been something different about him, something calm and grounded. Across the city, Ethan's morning began like every other. His driver dropped him at the corporate headquarters of Carter Foods, a glass tower overlooking the river. As he stepped into the elevator, his assistant, Claire, handed him his schedule. "You have a call with the marketing team at 9, and lunch with the board at 1, she said crisply. "Also, Mr. Carter, you look unusually cheerful today. Should I be concerned?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Just thinking about a conversation I had last night." Claire's eyes narrowed with teasing suspicion. A business conversation or a personal one? He ignored the question, stepping out of the elevator. But even as he walked down the marble hallway, That same image flickered in his mind, Lila's bright, uncertain smile across the cafe table. By late afternoon, the diner was nearly empty. Lila stood behind the counter counting her tips, mostly small bills, and a few coins. Her body ached, but her spirit refused to give up. She scribbled a few notes in her small notebook. Ingredients for her bakery recipes. Prices for used mixers she had seen online. The bell above the door jingled softly. Lila did not look up at first, assuming it was another late customer. But then a familiar voice spoke, deep and warm. "Hi," he said. "I was hoping you might have room for one more coffee." Her head snapped up. Ethan stood by the entrance, the same calm presence, though slightly out of place among the clatter of plates and smell of fried eggs. His suit jacket was folded over his arm, rain glistening on his shoulders. Lila froze, words catching in her throat. What are you doing here?" He smiled. "You left before I had the chance to thank you for one of the strangest and best conversations I have had in years." She blinked, still unsure what to say. "You came all the way here just to say that?" "Maybe," he said lightly. "Or maybe I was just in the mood for real coffee this time." Ruth glanced over from the register, grinning. "Lila, take care of our guest, will you?" Lila's face flushed as she grabbed a mug. "Fine," she said softly, "but I am making sure you are the right guy this time." Ethan laughed quietly. "Deal." As she poured his coffee, their eyes met again, no confusion this time, just something unspoken and warm. Outside, the rain began to fall again, tapping gently against the glass, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Neither of them knew it yet, but this would not be the last time their paths crossed. What began as a $5 mistake was slowly turning into something that neither of them could walk away from. The next few weeks rolled by quietly, but something had changed for both of them. Lila kept working long shifts at Rosie's diner. But now, every few mornings, a tall man in a dark coat would take a seat by the window, always the same booth, always ordering the same thing. "Black coffee, no sugar," she would say, setting the cup down with a smile that she tried to keep casual. "Exactly right," Ethan would reply, pretending not to notice the tiny curve of her lips that gave her away every time. It had become their small routine. Sometimes he would bring his laptop, claiming he needed a quiet place to read emails. Other times, he would simply sit and talk with her during her break. He told her little about himself, just that he worked in food manufacturing, which made her laugh. "Food manufacturing? You mean like donuts and cereal?" "Something like that," he said with a small grin. "We make a lot of people happy, let us put it that way." What he never said was that Carter Foods supplied half of the breakfast products on the supermarket shelves across the country. To her, he was just Ethan, the polite man who listened like every word she said mattered. One rainy Thursday afternoon, business was slow. The diner felt unusually calm, the kind of lull that made time stretch. Lila sat across from Ethan at his booth, sipping a milkshake that Ruth had insisted she take on the house. "So tell me," Ethan said, leaning forward, "what would you name your bakery again?" "Sweet Hands," she said instantly, her face lighting up. "It was my mom's phrase. She used to say, if your hands can make something with love, that love stays in it. She baked for the neighborhood back when I was a kid. I want to do that too, for people who need a little hope with their coffee." Ethan's eyes softened. "That sounds beautiful." Lila shrugged, smiling shyly. "It sounds expensive too. I have been saving, but it will probably take me 10 years. He did not answer right away. He just looked at her, the way her hands moved as she talked, the way she still dreamed despite everything. It stirred something in him that no board meeting ever could. Then Ruth's voice broke the moment. "Lila, sweetie, there is someone on the phone asking for you." Lila excused herself and hurried behind the counter. When she returned, the brightness in her eyes was gone. "Everything all right?" Ethan asked. "It was the hospital," she said quietly. "My mom's condition got worse. I have to go there tonight after work." "I am sorry," he said, his voice low. "Is she getting treatment?" "Trying to," Lila murmured. "The insurance barely covers anything. But I will figure it out." He wanted to help to say that money was not a problem, that he could make it all go away with one phone call. But he knew better than to offer too much, too soon. People like Lila had pride, and she had more of it than anyone he had ever met. Instead, he reached across the table and said softly, "You will figure it out, Lila. You always do." That night, she visited her mother in the small hospital on the north side. The machines beeped softly, their rhythm steady but fragile. Her mother smiled weakly when Lila entered, whispering, "You look tired, sweetheart." "I am fine," Lila said, forcing a smile. "I met someone who drinks worse coffee than I do." Her mother chuckled faintly. "That must be quite a man." Lila hesitated. "He is kind, just kind." "Then hold on to that," her mother said, squeezing her hand. "Kindness is rare these days." The next morning, Ethan stood at the window of his office, watching the sun rise over the skyline. The light poured through the glass, golden and soft, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He could still see the look in Lila's eyes when she mentioned her mother, equal parts fear and hope. By mid-morning, he had made a decision. "Claire," he called to his assistant, "pull the list of local community grants and health foundations under our corporate programs. I want to review something." Claire blinked. "That is not really under your department, sir." "It is now," Ethan said, his voice steady. Later that day, Lila found an envelope taped to the staff bulletin board at the diner. It was addressed to the daughter of Mrs. Monroe. Inside was a note written in neat, anonymous handwriting. "The hospital has received a donor contribution to cover the next 2 months of treatment. Please tell your mother she is not alone." Lila stared at the note for a long moment, her throat tightening. She turned the envelope over again and again, searching for a name, but there was none. That evening, when Ethan showed up at his usual booth, she approached with red eyes and a shaky smile. "Someone paid for my mom's medical bills," she said softly. "The hospital said it was an anonymous donor." Ethan's gaze met hers, calm and unreadable. "That is wonderful," he said. "Maybe good people still exist." Lila smiled faintly, wiping at her eyes. "Maybe they do." She did not see the way his fingers tightened around his coffee cup, or the way his jaw shifted ever so slightly. He had not wanted her to know it was him. Not yet. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a sky washed clean and silver. Inside, 2 people sat across from each other in a diner booth, one quietly grateful, the other silently falling in love. Neither of them spoke it aloud, but both knew something real had already begun. A week later, the city was still gray from endless rain. But inside Rosie's diner, there was a quiet hum of warmth. Lila was wiping the counter, humming under her breath when Ruth called out from the kitchen. "You have been smiling a lot lately, sweetheart. That mystery man still coming around?" Lila blushed, pretending to ignore her. "He is just a customer, Ruth." Ruth chuckled. "A customer who sits here for hours and tips like he is trying to buy the place? Come on, honey. Even the coffee machine knows you like him." Before Lila could reply, the bell above the door jingled. Ethan stepped in, his usual dark coat dusted with light rain. He smiled when he saw her, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the 2 of them. "Afternoon," he said. "You are early today," she replied, trying to sound casual. "Maybe I was just craving the company," he said lightly. Her heart fluttered, but she busied herself with the coffee pot. "Black coffee? No sugar?" As always, he sat in his booth, but this time, he placed a folder on the table. When she brought his cup, he pushed the folder toward her. "I was wondering if you would take a look at this for me." She frowned, setting down the mug. "What is it?" "Something I am working on. A community project." She flipped the folder open and blinked. Inside were sketches and plans for a neighborhood bakery and training center. At the top of the page, written neatly in black ink, were the words, "Sweet Hands Foundation." Her mouth fell open. "This is my bakery name." "Ethan, what is this?" He smiled faintly. "A friend of mine works in local development. We are funding small community projects that help local families. I told them about your idea." Her heart pounded. "You told them about me?" "Well," he said, shrugging lightly, "I might have borrowed your dream a little." Lila looked down at the papers again, overwhelmed. "This could help so many people." "That is the plan," Ethan said softly. "And I was hoping you would come to the event next weekend. We are hosting a small charity gala for local businesses. You could meet the team and maybe pitch your idea yourself." She hesitated, suddenly feeling small. "Ethan, I am not sure I belong at something like that. Those are people with suits and fancy shoes. I cannot even afford a proper dress." He leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Lila, you belong anywhere your heart takes you. Let me help you get there." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled, shy but genuine. "All right, I will go." Later that evening, when she got home, Emma nearly screamed when Lila told her about the gala. "Oh my God, you are going to a charity event with him? Do you realize what that means?" "It is not a date," Lila said quickly. "It is work. Well, kind of. He just wants me to talk about my bakery idea." Emma grinned. "Yeah, and maybe about how you make him smile like a teenager every time you are around." Lila rolled her eyes but could not help laughing. Still, as she lay in bed that night, her thoughts refused to quiet. Ethan's kindness, his calm, the way he looked at her, it all felt too good to be real. People like him did not belong in her world. Yet somehow, he kept showing up in it. The night of the gala arrived sooner than she expected. Lila stood outside the Grand Hotel, clutching a borrowed clutch bag, her breath catching in the cold air. The building glittered with gold lights, and through the tall glass doors, she could see people in elegant gowns and tuxedos mingling beneath chandeliers. She smoothed the skirt of her simple blue dress, borrowed from Emma, and whispered to herself, "You can do this." "Looks like you already are," said a familiar voice behind her. She turned. Ethan stood there in a dark suit, perfectly pressed, a quiet confidence in his smile. For a second, she forgot to breathe. "You clean up well," he said warmly. "So do you," she managed, her voice barely steady. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" Inside, everything felt surreal. The air smelled of champagne and polished wood. The sound of soft jazz floating through the room. Ethan guided her toward a small stage where a banner read Carter Foods Community Initiative. She stopped short. "Wait, Carter Foods? That is your company?" Ethan hesitated. "Yes." Lila blinked, realization dawning slowly. "You mean you are the CEO? Ethan Carter?" He nodded slightly, his expression careful. "I did not want to lead with that. I wanted you to know me before you knew the rest." Her breath caught. For a moment, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. "You have been sitting in my diner, drinking terrible coffee, while running one of the biggest companies in the country." "Guilty," he said softly. Before she could respond, a woman approached a reporter, camera crew in tow. "Mr. Carter, can we get a few photos? And this must be your guest?" The flash went off before Lila could react. People began to look their way, murmuring. She felt the heat rise to her cheeks. Ethan turned to her, voice low and reassuring. "You are all right. Just breathe." But she could not. The weight of the moment, the lights, the stares, the sudden truth was too much. She stepped back, shaking her head. "I need a minute," she whispered, before turning and walking quickly toward the exit. Ethan followed, stopping just before the doors. He wanted to run after her, to explain everything, but he knew the look on her face. It was not anger, it was hurt. Outside, the cold night air bit against her skin. She leaned against the railing, tears stinging her eyes. "All this time," she whispered, "I thought you were just a man who liked bad coffee." Behind her, Ethan stood silently in the doorway, his hands clenched at his sides. For the first time in years, he had no idea how to fix something. And for the first time in her life, Lila realized how fragile trust could be, how quickly a single truth could shatter it. The wind outside the hotel cut sharp and cold as Lila hurried down the marble steps. Her heels clicked against the stone, her breath shaky. She had never felt so small in her life. The people inside were laughing under chandeliers, glasses clinking, music flowing, while she stood outside trembling, clutching her borrowed clutch bag like it was armor. She did not even know where she was going. She only knew she had to get away from the cameras, from the whispers, from him. From Ethan Carter, the man she had trusted, the man she thought was just real. She reached the sidewalk, blinking against the rain. A voice called from behind her. "Lila, wait. Umzlesh." She turned, her eyes bright with hurt. Ethan had followed her, his suit jacket already soaked from the drizzle. "Please," he said quietly, stopping a few steps away. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" she snapped, her voice cracking. "That the man who came to my diner every morning was actually a millionaire CEO testing his charity project? That you sat there listening to me talk about my life like it was some kind of story to entertain you?" "It was never that," he said quickly. "I meant every word. I came because of you, not because of the project." She shook her head, her throat tight. "You could have told me the truth." "I wanted to," he said, "but I was afraid. Every time people find out who I am, they start treating me differently. I did not want that from you." Her eyes filled with tears. You could have trusted me. I do trust you, he said, his voice breaking a little. That is why I told you tonight. She took a step back. No, you told me because you had to. Because someone else would have told me first. That is not trust, Ethan. That is damage control. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Rain dripped from his hair, darkening his collar. The streetlights painted their faces, gold and gray. Finally, she whispered, I cannot do this. Then she turned and walked away into the rain. For days, the diner felt different. The same neon lights hummed above. The same smell of coffee and grease lingered. But for Lila, everything felt quieter. Ethan did not come back. His booth by the window stayed empty, the cup holder still bearing a faint ring from his last visit. Ruth noticed, of course. He stopped coming, she said gently one afternoon. Lila nodded without looking up. Good. Maybe he found somewhere better for his coffee. But her voice trembled when she said it. At night, when she lay in bed, she tried to forget him. She told herself he belonged to another world. The world of tailored suits and flashing cameras. But then she would remember the man who laughed at her bad jokes, who listened when she talked about her mother, who believed in her dream before anyone else ever did, and she could not hate him. Meanwhile, Ethan buried himself in work. He attended meetings, approved contracts, signed proposals, but everything felt hollow. Every time he glanced at the Sweet Hands Foundation file on his desk, his chest ached. He had started it for her, to help her build something beautiful. But now even the name reminded him of what he had broken. Claire noticed his silence. She does not know what kind of man you really are, she said one morning as she handed him his schedule. She knows enough, Ethan said quietly. Then prove her wrong, Claire replied. Do what you do best. Build something worth believing in. Her words lingered long after she left the room. That night, Ethan sat alone at his desk, staring at the city lights. Then he opened a blank document and began to type. Project proposal. Sweet Hands Bakery and Training Center in honor of Lila Monroe. A month passed before Lila heard from him again. She had finished her shift and was walking home when a delivery driver stopped her on the sidewalk. Are you Miss Lila Monroe? He asked. Yes, she said cautiously. He handed her a cream-colored envelope. Delivery for you, no sender listed. Inside was a letter on thick paper. It read, Dear Lila, sometimes the best things we build start from the worst mistakes. I hope you will come see what your dream has become. E.C. Below the note was an address. The next morning, curiosity and hesitation battled inside her, but something in those words pulled her forward. She took a bus across town to an old warehouse district. As she stepped off, she froze. In front of her stood a newly renovated brick building with white trim and a small hanging sign above the door. It read, Sweet Hands Bakery Foundation. Her throat tightened. She pushed open the door. Inside, the air smelled of sugar and fresh bread. Volunteers were unpacking boxes of flour and mixing bowls. At the center of the room, children and adults were laughing as they kneaded dough together, flour dusting their hands. Lila took a step forward, eyes wide. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the counter, sleeves rolled up, helping an elderly woman shape loaves of bread. When he noticed her, he froze, then smiled softly. You came, he said. She swallowed hard. You built this? He nodded. You built it, Lila. I just had the means to make it real. She looked around again, overwhelmed. This is exactly what I dreamed of. He took a slow breath. I wanted to show you that I never lied about one thing. Everything I did, every visit to that diner, every cup of terrible coffee, it was real. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not from anger. You should have told me sooner. I know, he said quietly, but I am telling you now. For a moment, the air between them felt still. Then, almost without thinking, she reached for the apron hanging by the door. If I am here, I might as well help. Ethan's smile deepened, relief washing over his face. I was hoping you would say that. As she tied the apron around her waist and joined the others at the counter, the sound of laughter filled the space. For the first time in a long while, Lila felt peace. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the words painted on the window, Sweet Hands. And somewhere in that quiet moment, between forgiveness and new beginnings, Both of them realized that sometimes love does not need grand gestures. It only needs truth, a little courage, and the kind of heart that believes again. Over the next few weeks, Sweet Hands Bakery Foundation became more than a project. It became a heartbeat in the quiet corner of the city. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread filled the air, and laughter drifted out to the street. Lila worked side by side with volunteers, teaching them how to bake and how to believe in themselves. Each loaf that came out of the oven carried more than warmth, it carried her story. Ethan came often, but never as the CEO. He rolled up his sleeves, dusted his hands with flour, and worked like everyone else. When people thanked him, he simply nodded toward Lila and said, "She is the reason this place exists." Oh. One Friday afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Ruth arrived with a tray of cupcakes. "You did it, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. "Your mom would be proud." Lila smiled, blinking away tears. She would have loved this place. Ethan stood near the door, watching quietly. She caught his gaze and walked over, wiping flour from her apron. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think people like you and me lived in different worlds." He smiled. "Maybe we just needed a bridge." "And you built one," she said. "No," he replied. "You did." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the hum of the bakery. Outside, the sky glowed orange, and the sign above the window shimmered in the fading light, "Sweet Hands." Later that evening, when the volunteers had gone home and the bakery was quiet, Ethan found Lila cleaning the counter. He hesitated, then said, "There is something else I want to show you." She turned, curious. "What is it?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring, elegant but modest. "Lila," he said, his voice steady, "I do not want to just build dreams with you. I want to build a life. You once said the best things come from honest hands. So here I am, honestly, asking if you will share your life with me." For a moment, she could not speak. Her throat tightened, and tears filled her eyes. "Ethan, He took her hand gently. "You do not have to answer now." But she shook her head, smiling through her tears. "I already know." Then, without hesitation, she whispered, "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time since they met, there were no misunderstandings, no masks, no mistakes, just two people who had finally found home in each other. As they stood together in the golden light of the bakery, Lila laughed softly and said, "You know, it all started with a $5 date gone wrong." Ethan smiled, pulling her close. "Best wrong turn of my life." The bell above the bakery door chimed softly as the evening breeze swept through. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that inside a small bakery, a love story had quietly come full circle. And as the lights dimmed, Lila's voice carried softly over the closing line of the night. "Turns out, the wrong table was the right one all along." The news spread faster than either of them expected. Within weeks, local newspapers began writing stories about the billionaire and the baker. Cameras showed up outside Sweet Hands, trying to capture a glimpse of the unlikely couple. Lila hated the attention at first. She was used to being invisible, to living quietly. Now, people whispered her name when she walked through the market or came into the diner. One morning, she found herself staring at a magazine headline on the counter. "Millionaire CEO marries the girl from Rosie's diner." The words made her chest tighten. She never wanted to be a headline, Ethan noticed. He reached across the table, his hand warm over hers. "Hey," he said softly, "ignore them. They do not know who we are." She smiled weakly. "I just do not want people to think this is a fairy tale. It was not easy, Ethan. We earned every bit of this." "I know," he said, nodding, "and that is exactly why it is real." Later that day, they returned to the bakery. Volunteers were already setting up for the foundation's first anniversary event. There were banners, cupcakes, and a big sign that read, "Thank you for 1 year of kindness." The place was buzzing with life families, children, and local workers who had found both jobs and hope through the project. Lila stood by the counter, her apron dusted with flour, her hair tied back. She looked around and felt her heart swell. A year ago, she could barely afford rent. Now she had a home, a community, and a purpose. When the clock struck noon, Ethan stepped forward to give a small speech. He did not stand on the stage. He stood beside Lila. "This bakery started as one woman's dream," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "A dream born not from money, but from kindness. Lila reminded me and maybe all of us that success means nothing if it is not shared. Applause filled the room, but Lila's eyes were on him, shining with quiet pride. When he looked back at her, it was clear that he was no longer the man who hid behind his title. He had changed, too. After the celebration, they stepped outside into the soft afternoon light. The city moved around them, ordinary and beautiful. Lila looked at the ring on her hand and then at Ethan. "Do you ever think about how strange it is?" she asked. "All of this happened because I sat at the wrong table." He smiled. "Maybe fate does not make mistakes. Maybe it just has a sense of humor." She laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. For the first time, everything felt simple again, no spotlights, no headlines, just two hearts that had learned what love meant beyond money and class. And as they watched the sunset spill gold across the bakery windows, Lila whispered, "I think Mom was right. If your hands can make something with love, that love stays forever." Ethan wrapped his arm around her and said softly, "Then we will keep baking it every single day." Winter came quietly that year. Snow dusted the rooftops, and the warm glow from Sweet Hands Bakery spilled out onto the street each evening, like a soft invitation against the cold. Inside, the smell of cinnamon rolls and chocolate filled the air, mingling with laughter and the sound of holiday music. Lila moved through the bakery with her usual calm rhythm, helping customers choose pastries, refilling coffee cups, and smiling at every face that came through the door. On the counter sat a small donation box labeled, "For Families in Need," nearly overflowing. Each dollar was another reminder that kindness had come full circle. Ethan walked in just before closing time, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Busy day?" he asked, his voice warm. "The best kind," Lila replied. "Every cupcake sold, every hand helped." He smiled, leaning against the counter. "You know, I used to think success meant numbers and charts. Now it looks like frosting and flour." "Oh well," she laughed softly. "That is because you finally learned what real wealth looks like." Ethan's expression softened as he reached into his coat pocket. "Speaking of wealth," he said, placing something small on the counter. It was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with time. Lila unfolded it carefully. It was the old $5 bill she had once given him months ago at that first mistaken meeting, the one that had started everything. Her breath caught. "You kept this?" He nodded. "Every day. I told myself I would not spend it until I found something worth more than all the money I had." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. "And did you?" He smiled gently. "I did. I found you." Lila reached across the counter and took his hand, her fingers trembling. For a moment, the world outside faded, the snow, the noise, the city lights, all of it. Then Ethan said quietly, "I want to do something special. Not just for us, but for everyone who helped build this. Let us host a community Christmas dinner here. No prices, no checks, just people and warmth." Lila's heart swelled. "You mean feed everyone?" "Yes," he said. "Every family, every worker. Anyone who needs a place to belong." Her eyes shone. "That sounds perfect." A few weeks later, on Christmas Eve, the bakery was filled with people, neighbors, volunteers, families, strangers. Long tables stretched across the floor, covered in homemade bread and steaming bowls of soup. Ethan helped serve coffee, while Lila laughed with children as they decorated gingerbread cookies. When the night ended, Ethan stood beside her, looking over the room glowing with candlelight. "You see this?" he whispered. "This is your dream, Lila. It is alive." She leaned into him, smiling softly. "Our dream," she corrected. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the city in quiet peace. And for once, neither of them wanted to be anywhere else. Spring returned with sunlight that melted the last traces of snow from the bakery windows. Sweet Hands had survived its first full year, and every inch of it felt like home, warm, alive, and filled with the scent of promise. On the front counter sat a framed photo of the Christmas dinner, hundreds of smiling faces captured in one moment of joy. Underneath, a small plaque read, "Kindness is the recipe that never fails." Lila stood by the window one morning, tying a new ribbon around the donation box. Children laughed outside, running down the street with paper bags of cookies. She looked out at them and smiled, remembering how far she had come. Just a year ago, she was a waitress trying to survive another shift. Now, she was the owner of a place that fed both bodies and hearts. Ethan walked in carrying a bouquet of white lilies, her mother's favorite. "They were blooming early this year," he said, setting them on the counter. "Thought you might like a little spring inside." She brushed a strand of flower from her cheek. They are perfect. She would have loved them. He smiled, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. There is one more thing, he said. A surprise. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet. Hanging from it was a tiny charm, a $5 bill engraved in silver, folded just like the one she had once given him. Lila gasped softly. Ethan, you turned it into this? He nodded. It is our story. A reminder that what started as a mistake became everything that matters. Her eyes shimmered as she clasped the bracelet around her wrist. It feels like coming full circle. Ethan smiled, taking her hand. You know, people still call me lucky for finding you. Oh. She looked up at him, her voice steady and tender. Maybe luck had nothing to do with it. Maybe it was faith. Faith that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life. They stood there for a moment, the morning sun spilling golden light across the bakery floor. The bell above the door jingled softly as new customers walked in, laughter filling the air again. Lila turned to him and whispered, "Do you ever think about how it all began?" "Every day," he said, "and I still would not change a single thing." She smiled, leaning up to kiss him gently. Neither would I. As the camera of life pulled back past the window, past the sign that read, Sweet Hands Bakery Foundation, their laughter mingled with the hum of the city. And in that glow of ordinary magic, one truth remained clear. Sometimes, the wrong table, the wrong man, and the wrong moment are exactly what fate uses to write the right love story. Because love, like good bread, always rises when it is made with real hands and an honest heart.